Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. Well, in a telephone call with Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said Kashmiris must be allowed to use their legal rights to be able to live in peace. He said every effort should be made for peace in the region. Khan said changing Indian-occupied Kashmir's demographics will be a violation of international law. He went on to say that the crackdown by Indian forces risks more violence in the occupied valley. The Prime Minister said India is trying to impose its extremist Hindu supremacist ideology in Kashmir. Well, India has decided to take legal action against media outlets for reporting violence in occupied Kashmir. The crushing curfew and communications blackout by Indian forces in Kashmir has entered its 7th day. Indian Home Ministry sources have confirmed that legal action is being initiated against media outlets not towing New Delhi's line. Local and international media reported multiple cases of violence by Indian troops against peaceful protesters in Srinagar. The former head of Congress, Rahul Gandhi, has called for action over violence by Indian troops in the valley instead of gagging the media. Indian Sikh leaders have asked the US to intervene over New Delhi's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir. This comes after the Indian government stripped Kashmir of its special status by revoking Article 370. In a letter to the US President Donald Trump, Dal Khalsa head Harpal Singh Chima said Sikhs strongly endorsed the Kashmiris' right to self-determination. Chima said it is high time that the US-led mediation efforts, as any delay can be disastrous for both Kashmir and the region. Meanwhile, in a joint statement, Sikh leaders claimed India wants to reduce states to colonies by revoking Article 370. Israeli troops have killed another Palestinian near the Gaza border after the Eid prayers. The death toll in the past 24 hours has risen to 5. Palestine's health ministry said 14 others were wounded as Israeli troops fired live ammunition and rubber bullets at the protesters. Thousands of Palestinians had gathered at the mosque for Eid prayers. Israeli police fired at the Palestinian worshippers to clear the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in occupied East Jerusalem. The Saudi-led coalition in Yemen has launched an attack against separatists controlling the port city of Aden after calling for a truce. It threatened to launch a military operation if the rebels don't quit the areas they captured yesterday. Aden is the temporary seat of the internationally recognized government in Yemen. According to the UN, clashes between government forces and rebels have killed 40 people and wounded over 200 others since August the 8th. It urged the authorities to guarantee unimpeded access for humanitarian organizations to provide medical aid to the wounded. President Ashraf Ghani says peace is coming to Afghanistan, but outsiders cannot decide the future of the country. Speaking at an Eid prayer gathering in Kabul, he said every Afghan desires peace, but it's not acceptable if it costs them their dignity. Ghani said Ghani and his government, are not involved in talks between Washington and the Taliban on an agreement for a withdrawal of US troops. The pact is likely to include a Taliban commitment to open power-sharing talks with their Afghan rivals, but it is not expected to include a Taliban ceasefire with the government. The Taliban don't recognize the Kabul government and have refused to talk to it. Syria's army has captured a strategically important town of Al-Hubayt in the rebels' last major enclave in Idlib. This is the most significant advance the army has made in the province since the start of its offensive in April. State media describes the town as a gateway to the south of Idlib. Earlier this week, the rebels acknowledged losing ground near Al-Hubayt, but have neither confirmed nor denied its complete capture. 70 fighters from both sides have been killed so far, after Syrian government scrapped a 3-day ceasefire for the region yesterday. Meanwhile, Russian media reported 120 rebels with heavy weaponry moving towards Idlib. Meanwhile, 5 people, including 3 UN staff members, were killed in a car bomb blast in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi. The explosion came hours after Libya's government and Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces agreed to an Eid ceasefire till August the 13th. The Libyan army said 2 guards with the UN Libya mission were also killed and 10 people injured in the blast. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the attack, calling on all parties to respect the truce. No group has claimed responsibility yet. Turkish forces have killed 2 more Kurdistan Workers' Party militants in a counter-terror operation in northern Iraq. The Turkish Defense Ministry said that the airstrikes destroyed a weapons cache and shelters used by the PKK. The ministry said the airstrikes on Gara region were conducted in coordination with Operation Claw. It said Ankara will continue to destroy weapon emplacements and shelters used by the terrorists. A total of 80 Kurd militants have been killed since the launch of the counter-terrorism offensive. Ankara blames the PKK for the deaths of some 40,000 people, including women and children. Over in Tanzania, 69 people have been killed after an overturned fuel tanker exploded. Officials said the victims died while siphoning fuel from the tanker some 200 kilometers west of Dar es Salaam. Regional Commissioner Stephen Kebwe said 70 others were critically burned. Kebwe said the number of deaths can rise as some of the victims were in critical condition and rushed to the Morogoro Regional Hospital. An eyewitness said many people who were not stealing fuel also died. In Norway, police say the shooting at a mosque near Oslo is being treated as an attempted act of terror. One person was wounded when a white teenager opened fire at a mosque when Muslims were preparing for Eid prayers. Police Chief Rune Skjold said initial investigations showed the suspected appeared to hold far-right and anti-immigration views. Hours after the attack, the body of a young woman related to the suspect was found in a home in Bayram. Investigators are treating her death as suspicious and have opened a murder probe. Meanwhile, as the monsoon season rages on, 23 people, including a child, have lost their lives in rain-related incidents in Pakistan's Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa provinces. In India, the death toll from floods in the state of Karnataka, Kerala and Maharashtra rose to 147. 9 people were electrocuted while 2 others were killed in roof collapses in Karachi's Qasba colony and Patta village. Karachi Mayor Wasim Akhtar demanded that the city be declared disaster struck. Several areas of the city have gone out of power. 4 people were killed in different rain-related incidents in other parts of Sindh. The Provincial Disaster Management Authority says 8 people were killed in Bajor, Sawat and other areas of KP. In India, heavy rains and landslides forced thousands of people to take shelter in relief camps, while train services were cancelled in several areas. The death toll from a landslide triggered by heavy rains in Myanmar's Mon state has reached 48. Officials said a deluge of mud engulfed 16 homes and a monastery in the village of Tai Pyar Kone. He says dozens of others were injured in the incidents. Floods have also forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes across the country. While 32 people have been killed and 20 others missing in a landslide after Typhoon Likima hit eastern China's Zhejiang province. Authorities have issued a high-level orange warning throughout the eastern region. Hundreds of flights and trains have been cancelled and 1 million people evacuated. Chinese state media says 3 million households have experienced a power blackout. Strong winds have destroyed 200 houses and over 66,000 hectares of farmland. 186 rescue teams, 36,000 firefighters and 8,400 fire engines have been assembled. In Spain, wildfires have prompted the evacuation of over 1,000 residents from the Canary Islands. Firefighters dropped water from helicopters in an attempt to extinguish the blaze. 200 fighters are on the ground and 10 aerial vehicles have been deployed to fight the blaze. The government of Spain has been asked to incorporate a hydroplane into the extinction work. A 55-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of starting the blaze while doing metal work. North Korea has suspended all negotiations with South Korea over its joint military drills with the US in the Japan Sea. The Foreign Ministry says inter-Korean contact will be difficult unless the military exercises are stopped. Washington and Seoul kicked off largely computer-simulated small-scale exercises on Saturday for a 10-day run. They serve as an alternative to previous large-scale annual drills that were halted to expedite nuclear talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Pyongyang has called the exercises a rehearsal for war. North Korean media reported that Supreme Leader Kim Jong-un oversaw test firings of a new weapon system. This came hours after US President Trump claimed Kim had written him a letter with an apology for the recent missile tests. Now in Hong Kong, police have fired tear gas to disperse people protesting against a controversial extradition bill for the 10th consecutive weekend. Thousands of activists occupied the airport arrival halls for a third day during the anti-government protests. The region's government suspended the bill, but now demonstrators are demanding the resignation of the city's leader, Carrie Lam. Lam has said rallies should be ended now as they are hurting the city's economy. More than 60,000 Russian opposition supporters have protested in Moscow against the mass detention demonstrators. The protesters defied a crackdown to demand free and fair elections for Moscow's city legislature. The protesters staged the largest demonstration since President Vladimir Putin's return to the Kremlin in 2011. Protesters carried placards with anti-government slogans, and police detained senior opposition politician Lyubov Sobol ahead of the mass rally. Moscow Election Commission has disqualified several opposition figures from next month's local elections. More than 2,000 opposition activists were arrested during two recent demonstrations in Moscow. Tens of thousands of Romanians have taken to the streets of the capital, Bucharest, demanding the government to step down. Protesters accused the ruling Social Democrat government of massive corruption and attacks on the judiciary. More than 20,000 people, both from the diaspora and from within Romania, rallied outside government headquarters. Local media says the protest was organized and promoted by groups of Romanians working abroad. Despite scorching temperatures, they rallied demanding the cabinet's resignation. During the last year's protest, police crackdown allegedly injured more than 400 peaceful demonstrators. The protest commemorated the one-year anniversary of a violent police crackdown on protesters. Thousands have protested in Honduras to demand President Juan Orlando Hernandez's resignation for his alleged links with drug trafficking. Massive protests erupted after a report claimed that President Hernandez's 2013 election campaign benefited from drug proceeds. Prosecutors allege the president's brother Tony Hernandez used his influence to ensure safe crossings for traffickers. President Hernandez and his far-right National Party have denied the accusations. Hernandez claims he is the victim of a conspiracy. Well, Muslims in many countries are celebrating Eid al-Adha today with religious fervor. The day is observed to commemorate the sacrifice by Prophet Ibrahim. Eid al-Adha celebrations start with Muslims offering Eid prayers and then sacrificing their cattle for God. The occasion is marked with charity and the distribution of sacrificial meat to the poor. Eid begins after pilgrims across the world offer Hajj in Mecca. Well, 8 British cyclists have pedaled their way from London to Saudi Arabia to perform the Hajj and raise money for charity along the way. The ride, dubbed Tour de Hajj, covered 4,000 miles across 17 countries in 60 days. The cyclists were raising money for a charity which aims to help building infrastructure in villages in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, South Africa and Uganda.
Since we crossed from Turkey to Egypt, it's kicking in now, the excitement. I'm looking forward to seeing the sign for Medina en route, and I think that will be the moment where I start, really getting excited.
With the goal of raising £500,000, the cyclists have so far collected £50,000 upon reaching Medina. The cyclists said the journey was long and the conditions were challenging, but they were determined to complete the tour.
Alhamdulillah, we've had bad weather. At the same time, we've had really hot weather. So I think, the elements of the heat, the rain, the climate change when you go up a certain level, when you go above the clouds, the oxygen levels are low. Sometimes we couldn't get, decent food in Europe. We couldn't get halal food. So there's many challenges.
The journey took the group of cyclists through London, Paris, Bulgaria and Cairo. Now, with rising rents in big cities and changing lifestyles, a new way of sharing apartments, co-living, is gaining ground. Startups take care of everything, including the roommates' social lives. Indus News has this report.
Nandita Iyer landed in New York from Bombay without knowing anyone, but she didn't want to live alone in a sketchy studio. So instead, she opted for a room in a co-living unit. She lives with roommates in one of the 14 apartments in a small building run by the housing startup Quarters.
I knew that New York City is where everyone comes from different places and they have their own journeys, and knowing people is very important. So I figured living in a co-living space, I'd get a chance to meet new people from different backgrounds. And that's exactly what happened. When I came to Quarters, I met people from such different backgrounds, and I became very good friends with them, and then I became friends with their friends.
Group living arrangements are not new. Many people have lived with roommates in student dormitories or retirement homes. But with housing costs skyrocketing in major cities and amid changing lifestyles, startup companies are offering to take care of everything for renters. This includes the social life of their residents.
Everything is done online, from touring the place in 3D and up to signing the lease itself, and then moving in. You just move in. We coordinate everything for you. You come. The entire product is completely fully furnished.
Demand for these new group housing arrangements is on the rise, especially among young people aged 18 to 35, the millennials. The new players include Quarters, Common, Ollie, Star City, Ex-Social Communities, The Collective, and We Live. They're focusing on millennials for now, but hope to do the same things for young families.
There are definitely economies and urban environments where I think co-living could become the new co-working in terms of how important and how much fast it grows. And I could see it in certain European cities, where there's a lot of influx of new people. And
the companies say with smaller rooms, co-living is 15 to 30% cheaper than a studio in the same area, but that does not necessarily make them more affordable than a traditional roommate situation.
Steel giant ArcelorMittal strives to clean up and turn around Italy's most polluting plant, while activists and residents urge its closure. Experts cited by prosecutors have said 11,550 people died from toxic emissions over 7 years.
On Italy's southern coast, rock climbers scale a giant canopy in Taranto to build the world's biggest iron ore park cover. Steel giant ArcelorMittal strives to clean up and turn around the country's most polluting plant. Beyond the factory lie the sea and sandy beaches, though only hardy souls dare to swim or eat mussels from there. The site in southern Italy's Zulia region, formerly owned by UA, is at the heart of a huge legal battle.
At the beginning of the year, there was condemnation by the European Court of Human Rights, which said that these decrees did not guarantee the health of citizens, and therefore the state should have taken note of this sentence and acted in a different way from where it did.
ArcelorMittal is spending 1.2 billion euros to curb pollution at the site by 2024. It was given a legal immunity to bring the plant up to environmental standards, but the Italian parliament revoked that in June.
This is the first important action being taken. It is to avoid, prohibit or prevent any dust flying due with conditions that we may have in the region. So this is a program that will be 80% complete in 2020.
Lié aux conditions, par exemple, de vent.
As Taranto suffers from record unemployment, some feel everything should be done to save the steel works. But ArcelorMittal has struggled to win hearts. While the company pledges to slash dioxin and dust emissions to below EU limits, they cannot be eliminated entirely. Families have been hit by abnormal levels of tumors and respiratory diseases.
There are two possible causes, pesticides or dioxins. We do not live near fields and are careful about hygiene of fruits and vegetables. Impossible. On the other hand, we live next to the factory that has been dumping dioxin day and night for years. 1 + 1 makes 2. No need to do some study to prove it.
Many residents accuse the government and the plant's previous owners of willful negligence.
Now let's take a look at the business news. Volatility in China's yuan since August is a normal market reaction to escalating trade frictions stoked by the US. The Director General of the People's Bank of China's International Department, Su Jun, said Washington has only itself to blame. He said the currency's instability is a consequence of the US decision to further raise tariffs. The US labeled China a currency manipulator after the yuan dropped through a key support level to its lowest point in more than a decade. Su Jun said the labeling violates basic common economic sense and international consensus and is unconvincing. First up in sports, Daniil Medvedev beat Karen Khachanov in an all-Russian semi-final to reach the Rogers Cup final in Montreal. Medvedev will face Rafael Nadal after injured Frenchman Gael Monfils withdrew himself from the semi-final match with the Spaniard. 8th seed Medvedev prevailed 6-1, 7-6 over Khachanov in a victory that made him Russia's top-ranked player. France's Monfils defeated Bautista Agut in the quarter-final but injured his left ankle during the game. Later, he announced that he was in no shape to face Nadal in the semi-final due to the injury. Italian Andrea Dovizioso has surged past MotoGP world champion Marquez of Spain at the last corner to win a thrilling Austrian Grand Prix for Ducati. Dovizioso trimmed the Spaniard's runway lead to 58 points. The battle between Ducati and Honda featured several twists and turns before the Italian rider's forceful move in the last minute. The pair got engaged in a private contest, running wheel-to-wheel in 9 of the 28 laps. Starting from a record 59th MotoGP pole, Spaniard Marquez went back in front with 3 laps remaining, but Dovizioso powered it through to the end. French rider Fabio Quartararo was third for the Petronas Yamaha team. Well, runner Harry Summers has bagged his third win at the annual City to Surf race in Sydney. He crossed the winning line in 40 minutes and 5 seconds, just 2 seconds shy of the record time. More than 80,000 people took part in the race. The 14-kilometre run to Bondi Beach raises millions of dollars for various charities across Australia. A 2-kilometre steep incline at the halfway mark is deemed the most difficult part of the course. The course record to date is 40 minutes and 3 seconds, set by Steve Monaghetti in 1991. And in the English Premier League, Raheem Sterling has scored a hat-trick as Manchester City beat West Ham United in their opener. Burnley also secured a win against Southampton, while Everton drew their match against Crystal Palace. Defending champions Manchester City thrashed West Ham 5-0. Sergio Aguero and Gabriel Jesus netted goals for City along with Sterling. In another match, Burnley beat Southampton 3-0 thanks to a brace from Ashley Barnes. Everton drew against Crystal Palace as both teams missed sitters in their opener. Athletes have voiced concerns over water quality and high temperatures at a marathon swimming test event for Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympics. This comes as the Japanese capital swelters through a deadly heat wave. The air temperature was 30 degrees when the event started in the morning. FINA rules state that athletes may not race when the water temperature exceeds 31 degrees. The body said the competitors' well-being was top priority and it would monitor both water quality and temperature. Weather-related issues have become a massive hurdle for sports organizers in Tokyo. The start time of several events has already been moved up in a bid to mitigate the effects of Japan's blistering heat. Well, it's 32 degrees Celsius here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all I had from the news bulletin, and in fact I've just been told that my dad watched the news bulletin for the first time ever in his life. So hi Dad, and thanks for watching In This News.